So hello, play the game, it's Xiant again. This is in Black Ops 1, and as you can see in the wonderful, wonderful lower third that I've been provided, this is about being a lead designer. Now I'm talking specifically about being the lead designer on a multiplayer game like Black Ops 2, any Call of Duty, any multiplayer shooter specifically, and how being that particular person puts an enormous amount of weight on your shoulders. Because when you think about it, the lead multiplayer designer is the lead vision for multiplayer in a video game. He makes the first and perhaps final calls on most multiplayer maps, makes the first and perhaps final calls on all the multiplayer mechanics, first and final calls on balance changes. You get my point. And we know from Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2, the wonderful David Vonderhaar, lead multiplayer designer, is what I'm calling him. It's probably not his official title. The point being is that we blame Vaughn for our problems. And for the most part, I think there is credence to it in some cases. However, we have to take into account that no video game is made in isolation, nor is it made by a single man. Vaughn is one person, his opinion, as important as it is, can be swayed. But, as I say, he is the first and perhaps final word on every choice that's being made. Is he the lead animator? No. Is he the lead art director? No. He is only the lead on the multiplayer as a whole. So when you look at the animation in Black Ops 2, and you look at it in Advanced Warfare, and you see that one is a little jankier than the other, and I speak of Advanced Warfare when I talk about the jankiness, it has to go through one guy. And of course, he can cede control of certain things because he knows that his team can do what he needs them to do. And just to clarify, the he is the generic he of being the lead multiplayer designer. There is certainly she's in the world that do multiplayer lead design, but simply for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to stick with he. And this multiplayer designer, again, can cede control of the aesthetic of a map, of the time of day, of the way an animation is done, because he doesn't have the time to oversee and micromanage absolutely everything in the map, in the multiplayer. It's just not possible. But it is primarily his vision that we're talking about here, which, in a game as big as Call of Duty, a game as large and as massive as something like Battlefield or even Titanfall, that is a huge amount of responsibility, especially when the communities are millions of players large. And in some cases, as with Call of Duty, especially on the consoles, of a younger audience, who may tend to be the more vocal, or the less inhibited in what they want to say. Which is not, of course, to say that there are not adults who are more than happy to say their opinion very, very harshly. But when there are that many voices vying for your attention, that many voices vying for your approval, that many voices vying for changes that you have to approve, it's at this point that things become really, really complicated. Now, a multiplayer shooter is complicated enough as it is, and I think a lot of people don't give these designers enough credit. They have to account for everything, and of course, they can't. Because putting something in a small group test, even a few hundred people, who are looking for bugs, is not going to find the really, really, really interesting stuff, or the broken stuff, or the stupid stuff. You're not going to find it. But your job as visionary is to foresee everything you could possibly foresee, because you have to cater to every part of your audience. Catering purely to the niche will not work as a business decision. And so, unfortunately, you have to think about the pieces of your community that a vocal minority may not approve of. And before I go on, let me say that if you ever see me in real life, you are welcome to kick me in the head for saying what I'm about to say. But I was watching some coverage of the new multiplayer maps for Advanced Warfare that were put up by IGN's channel for Advanced Warfare, and this was with the lead multi-designer of Advanced Warfare. And of course, the interviewer was making some stupid jokes and blah, blah, blah. But he mentioned campers, and he mentioned slower-paced gameplay, and of course he said, "Those camping bastards," like, you know. But the point being is that he asked about it, And then the lead multiplayer designer said, or rather implied rather than saying, that they had thought about the campers, they had thought about the snipers, they had thought about the people whose playstyles are slower. Because he showed a very interesting spot, which, granted, will probably never be actually used, which I'll get to in a moment. But they think about it. Now, I had to hesitate to say they think about the broken parts of the game when they're designing these maps. They want the maps to work from the ground up. They don't want there to be any exploitable things, no out-of-the-map glitches, no mechanics that will allow someone an unfair advantage that was not built into the map already. But then I think about some of the Modern Warfare 3 DLC maps where there were literally spots made for boosting, and I just think, well, maybe they do think about that part of their community, and we just sort of have to live with it. And then you have to think about how a designer designs a map. They think about where's a power position, where is a good spot for that sniper, for that camper, for that rusher, that shotgun user, where in the map can we create these locations? And then, of course, because map design is iterative, there's no good way to just do it right the first time and account for everything, and they do, again, have to account for everything. They think that there are power positions. Remember when Vaughn said back in the day that on Encore that the stage was going to be the big thing about that map? And he could not have been more wrong. Or when they were talking back in Black Ops 1 about Zoo, how the railway was this really important thing and it was going to really change the way it was. No. No one, hardly anyone touched the railway. Designers usually misjudge their maps. Where they think people will congregate is exactly, usually at the very least, where they don't. And I think that's part of the fun of being a lead multiplayer designer, is creating experiences you did not expect. I'm thinking of the game No Man's Sky, and when the programmers who knew the code of a game were surprised by the code they had written, I think the same could be said for Call of Duty multiplayer, in the good and the bad. You have to have vision, you have to take control of it, but you have to still be able to give enough room for things to change. Which I think is part of the draw of making a shooter or playing a shooter, is that we'll come into the experience not knowing much of anything, even for Call of Duty, where we think and we do know quite a bit about it. At the same time, there's a lot of it we don't know. We don't know the maps, we don't know the power positions, we don't know the weapons, we don't know the kill streaks. None of this we know. And so we want to come into it fresh every year. And designing a Call of Duty every year, even for a seasoned development team, especially once the game is out in the wild, it's got to be a very interesting and enlightening and rewarding experience, seeing where the players go, even when they break the game. It's a teaching experience, if nothing else. But most importantly, I think it's the draw of the unknown and discovery. And then again, Call of Duty, especially in public settings, is supposed to be about fun. If it's not fun for the developers, it won't be fun for the gamers. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you later.